Okay, hi everyone. We are going to be starting. Just a couple of quick words. So everyone's been muted just to have no interruptions. We do welcome questions, so there's a question area for you there to type any questions that you have. Make sure to tell the instructor Danielle if you cannot hear her, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. And a little bit about EPIC. So we've been around for about 26 years, and we offer courses for IT and technical professionals. We do offer courses as seminars in different locations around the country. And also, if you're a manager, if you want courses for your employees, then we can offer courses at your location. You, of course, are welcome to attend any of the webinars as well. There are many webinars offered every single year. And just go to the website that we have here, which is epictraining.ca/online, to view all the different courses. We have various engineering disciplines, including some general courses as well. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Danielle. So Danielle, it's all yours.
Great, thank you. And again, I do encourage you to look at epictraining.ca online for some great other courses to help build your skills. Truly, these are like cost-effective solutions. And building on that, in terms of some cost-effective, useful information, I will be speaking through audio. So if you have questions, you can let Alia know through the question and answers. Otherwise, as you see on the screen here, this is how to phone in. Alternatively, you can also just use the audio. And with that, I want to welcome everybody here today. So I see a lot of great responses here. Purvi, Phil, there's so many, Kendra, Linda. Thank you all, and the many others for being on today's session. I'm excited that you are interested in high-impact presentation skills to take your career to the next level. In this next 60 minutes, I'll be sharing with you some really useful tips that you can apply right away. And why me? Why am I talking? Well, my name is Danielle Wallace. I have had the privilege to deliver many presentations at the organizations I worked with, including Procter & Gamble and PepsiCo. And along the way, it led to some good results. I'll share with you some of my learning and how you can benefit from some of my mishaps along the way. So with that, I do want to let you know that today's 60-minute session is action-packed. There is a lot of great information we'll be sharing and discussing via the poll and various chat features, the question features. There is a handout afterwards which summarizes what I've been sharing today. You don't need it right now. We won't refer to it. However, after the webinar, it can be very useful to provide a synopsis of what we shared. So if you're not able to take notes, not a problem at all. I also want to let you know this is not a typical webinar where right now you're multitasking, and I see you. I can see you through this camera. I actually see that you have your email open and you're doing email right now. And I see you too with your lunch. Totally cool. You can be eating on this, but I encourage you to close that email. I see you. And instead, we'll be discussing items. And we'll take a stab at that right now. I'd like you to use the question box and write in what your career background is, whether you're an engineer at a firm, a consultant, academic, business management, etc. This is a great way for us to practice using that question field. I'll give you a few moments. Oh, great. Thank you for all this great participation. Same thing as Rudy, you're a civil technician, and Danielle, you're a civil engineer. Anna, thanks, you're a municipal design engineer. Aaron, you're a government engineer. David, you're a construction estimator. These are great. As I look through these, I'm seeing a wide spectrum actually, from engineering, manufacturing with Mark to Lisa as a field inspector, and everything in between. This is fantastic. This is really helpful to see these themes. I do see some themes as civil engineering consultant like yourself, Kevin, and others. We'll be having tips and tricks that will be applicable to all of these roles. So thank you for that. As I mentioned today, we'll be using the question feature like you just did right now and the polling feature. Because of the numbers, we're not using the talk feature. So just wanted to make sure everybody's on the same page with that. And in terms of some ground rules to keep us on the same page, we have a 60-minute session, and as mentioned, I encourage you to close that email. We'll keep our dialogue open with me talking on the phone, so I'll be available at all times to answer questions. I'll summarize what you're saying in the chat, and you'll be using that chat question feature to ask your questions. And lastly, as mentioned, there is a summary afterwards. Okay, that was a lot of information. But now let's actually get to the important stuff. So in today's session, what I'll be sharing with you is the importance of a presentation strategy, why planning is your friend, how to confidently deliver your message, and how to command respect in your delivery. So at the end of the day, what you'll be doing is you'll be able to confidently present ideas and increase your corporate regard. Everything from the sound presentation strategy that you walk away with to determining, hey, what do I include or what don't I include? Some key things here. And ways to capture and hold your audience's attention. We'll even build on that, and we'll look at how you can use voice, pace, and tone to create interest. I've been modeling a bit of that so far. And then lastly, we'll touch upon the roles of visual aids to provide support. So there's a lot we're covering in this short period of time, and it will move fast, as you may have guessed, which is why that handout, which summarizes everything, will be a useful resource from EPIC after this session. But let me tell you a bit about how we can use these skills here and how I, unfortunately, didn't use them in a real life story that happened to me. So I was new at the company I was working with, and I was really eager to make a good first impression and get ahead. And I had this chance with my key presentation to the president and each of the VPs and other important decision makers. The presentation was to outline my plans for the next year. I worked on this presentation for 3 months. No joke, 3 months. I literally spent like 70-hour work weeks on this. This was an incredibly big deal. So the day of my big presentation came, and I was nervous, but I got through my hour-long presentation. During it, I noticed that the president started in on his iPhone at about 10 minutes in. And near the end, though, he just started talking to the VP beside him and laughing. I took it as a good sign that he was smiling. And really, I actually just wanted to get through the presentation and catch up on my sleep. So a day later, my mentor, who also saw my presentation, she took me aside and said that my theatrical presentation wasn't the right fit for the company. And it made an amusing impression on the president. She also told me that I needed to consider the needs of the audience better, and that overall I set my reputation in that brief encounter, but not for the better. She said it came more like a clueless entertainer. And it gets worse. I noticed that none of my recommendations actually received approval from the president. I spoke with my manager, and he said that the real decision maker was actually the finance manager, and I didn't have enough detail to address his concerns. So here I was, having worked months on this, and there was no action, nothing happening as a result of my presentation. I started to get the feeling I wasn't that well regarded, and that this impression of me had been set. And unfortunate but true, I was actually moved off that large project and to a more minor one. And this affected my promotion track as well. overall, I didn't consider the audience, really, and their needs. And I didn't keep the audience's attention in the right way. I also didn't have clear next steps to ignite action. For me, it was a clear but unfortunate learning experience. So based on that, what I'll be sharing with you is some real techniques you can use to avoid my mishaps and instead set yourself up for success. The first of those key factors that we'll look at, of the 5 listed here, is your presentation strategy and the importance of planning for your audience's needs. So firstly, you really want to think about what is your goal. Really, what do you want your audience to do as a result of what you're telling them? This is paramount. Like, have that crystal clear goal. And then on that, really look at who is the decision maker. Who else has influence? Decision maker is not always a person with the technical knowledge and details. But you really want to be targeting that person. In my example, was a finance manager, and others might be the plant manager, or what have you. And importantly, when you look at that, you need to consider that it may not be who you think it is. You have to do that homework up front to determine who has the final decision. And with that, which you'll see in the resources, I do have a presentation planner just to help you get to those recommendations a little bit easier. I'd like to hear from the chat what you do as you prepare for a session. What are some of the things that you do? You can just write that in the questions/chat box. So there's some great responses coming through here from talking to stakeholders, writing an outline. Tyler, thanks for response about getting your notes ahead, people notes ahead of time. I'm looking over the budgets, Rudy. It's great. Dave, you had looking at the questions in advance. I see a lot of themes like Eleanor's, but having the right notes, the right outline. And Jennifer even takes it to the next level and practices out loud. I like what Sierra says about analyzing the issues, and Ryan really picks up on that. Likewise, Danielle really hones in on that focus, deciding on the purpose that we just spoke about. All of these are really imperative to having the right message, to ensuring that who you're presenting to makes sense. As Yasmin says, knowing what you're presenting, your objectives, your brief examples, and your wrap-up. So in that, it really is the summary of that plan of what you can be talking about. And Adam echoes that in presenting and molding his presentation to the audience. That is key. You have a chance to practice that right now in this mini case study. So imagine this scenario here. Bob is frustrated because his department, his product line is operating at full capacity, and yet he is getting pressure from the sales department to increase output by 30% in Q4, which will deliver increased revenue of 30%. So that's sort of what's happening. But for Sally as manager, this higher production is resulting in increased mechanical errors and an increased risk of shutdown. Her reputation is on the line if that plant shuts down. For Bob, he knows that this $200,000 in upgrades in the capital budget for the unit could help alleviate the production issues now. So Bob has secured a presentation slot at next month's management leadership team meeting, and Sally will attend to support him. This is Bob's big opportunity to present. So with this, take a think about what you would do if you were in this situation. Would you have a presentation objective similar to what Bob has here? What's wrong with Bob's presentation objective? So he wants to show, as it shows on the screen here, he wants to show senior management about what he thinks the real issues are, and that the plant might shut down if something isn't done, and soon. So keeping that in mind, think about what you think is wrong. So click on the corresponding item, and when there's sufficient responses, we will close the poll. And incidentally, this is somewhat based on a real-life situation. It happened at my husband's plant, and an unfortunate one at that, if we're saying something is wrong with Bob's presentation objectives. Got great responses coming in, fantastic, and we're seeing some similarities in the answer here. I'll give you another moment, and then I'll be closing the poll, and I'll just be telling you what the results are. So what we are seeing from a results standpoint is that most people are saying, hey, all these things are wrong. There's too much unnecessary info and no purpose. And if you were saying, hey, it's fine, it's the truth. But yeah, to your point, this is not the best way of handling the situation. There's a lot of unnecessary information and there's no clear purpose. And come on, let's face it, he's casting his boss in a bad light, which is just not a smart career move. A better objective would be that Bob wants senior management to move forward with the capital allotment for her unit this year. And the business implication is that this will increase sales by 30%. So there's a better way of getting at his responses than what he is sharing right now. So with that, it's great you get the idea of having this crystal clear purpose and including only what's relevant. And this all comes together when we're planning and anticipating the audience's needs. So having that clear objective, like we've talked about, and knowing what those real decision makers actually care about. With that, we're going to go to the next element, which is critical in planning, and it is preparing relevant content. We spoke a bit about this in your responses that you had. In your preparation, you talked about having that outline to focus on what's essential. And as reading between the lines of your responses, it looks like encouraging you to include to not include what's not essential. Let me pick one here. Let's pick this one here. So think about what is essential for the listeners to know about, and then conversely, provide them sufficient background. A way to do that is to focus on the so what for the learner. So give your learners only the details that are warranted. Like in Bob's example, there's lots there that, yeah, well, it's true, isn't helpful for the listener to understand. So really take that step back and decide what information is right for your listener. Because a presentation can be ineffective because it has too many details. Or conversely, it can be ineffective because it's not detailed enough and jumps to conclusions without giving necessary data. I often get a response or a question on this. It's like, well, you know, but I have lots of great data. Like, if I look at it, what do I do? My solution to that is, you know, keep it handy as your appendix. Because it's so easy for this listener to become overwhelmed with data that's not critical. Instead, if you focus on the fundamentals and get to the point without getting blinded by the sheer amount of information you could share. Another thing to keep in mind too when you're planning is that from a timing perspective, presentations always take longer to deliver than you think. So keep that in mind when you're planning your allotted time, and especially given that first step you've known your audience, you have a feel for what questions your micromanaging plant manager may ask you, so you may know what additional time you need to allocate to Q&A at the end, and you may know whether you need or don't need to have a detailed appendix. In essence, focus on those fundamentals. Another aspect supporting these fundamentals is preparing useful visual aids. What I'm showing here is an actual slide from a presentation I was to give. So I'd like to have you type into the chat what you think is ineffective with this slide. So type that into the chat question box. And this is real. This is my this is a presentation I was supposed to deliver. Too many bars, says Linda. Too much information, says Wendy. Overwhelming, says Jennifer, Wendy, and Paul. Eric says the font's too small. Mark, Tim, and Aaron also echo that. Ryan saying, and Mike are both saying that it's too cluttered. Lisa, Jeremy, Pearl, you're saying that it's not clear what this message is. There's too much happening. And also I hear the idea of there's no content. Yeah, there's both too much, that it's cluttered, like Ratchet's saying, but also not enough content. Lisa's not clear what these arrows mean. Like there's something happening here, but there's no message. And as Michael basically points out, there is, what's the so what? Like who cares here? And Aaron and others also talking about this footnotes being like too cluttered, busy, and unnecessary. Yeah, this is exactly what's wrong. Yeah, this is unfortunately a real example. So to your point, this message isn't clear, and the audience doesn't love the data as much as the presenter. I was working for a research team, and boy, did the team love their data. Wow, and did the audiences not? Wow, clearly disconnect. So it's good to have that clear message, and importantly, use the real estate on your screen to have a clear visual to tell the audience what's important. In this revised version, as you see here, there is a clear headline that provides useful information for the decision maker. There's a lot less information on the screen here. It's really highlighting that, okay, we got some key gross spendings up, this is unchanged, it's all supported with a very clear title that you know, hey, okay, this is relevant. And the footnote is much smaller at this point. Importantly, at a glance, people can get a sense for what they need to do to improve. And there is feedback and further enhancements we can make on this, but it provided a lot more engaging response from the audience as a result. And with that, we can think about how we can really take this to the next level and really have fantastic presentations which have very clear slides and don't add too much unnecessary details. Have you seen some presentations with too much unnecessary data? So you could put those into the chat. And conversely, if you've also seen, or instead, if you've seen some really good presentations, you put that into the chat, that would be great. Some great responses coming in from people's own organization ones, some good TEDx ones. Rudy says his manager does this a lot. Hopefully that's on the good, not the bad. A lot of people are saying they're familiar with both. Too much reading of the slides is what Mark says. This is so common across organizations. The slides are meant for presenting, not as a handout. Too much reading, Linda also echoes this. Not enough illustrations, says Ryan. This is so typical of what we see in many organizations. There's such an ability to not only change our delivery of it, but also change what we're sharing. And knowing that audience is really critical to this. University lectures and presentations, as Erin says, yeah, there's so much unnecessary data in those. I agree. So with this, really keep in mind the idea of less is more. And it comes back to what we've talked about, knowing who those decision makers are and what they actually care about will be the most useful method of getting your point across and having a better corporate regard. And with that, another element to help with our corporate regard is organizing for understanding and persuasiveness. So realizing that you should know who your learner is, so you should know who your audience is. It's keeping in mind, how do I best lead them in a way that makes the most sense? So you want to effectively lead that listener and illustrate that you are competent and in control. There is a checklist for your presentation planning that you'll see in the handout as well. So think about this from a very simple standpoint of having an introduction. So off the top, is your introduction strong? Does it appeal to the audience? We'll talk about ways to capture and maintain attention a bit later in the session. Think of it from that standpoint. My starting date. Going to the goal. As we said earlier with the objectives, you said back to me in the chat how it's important to have that really crystal clear objective. This is key, and you need to tell your audience what your objective is. You must tell people what you're going to speak about and what your purpose is. Specifically when speaking with senior management, let them know if I need a decision on this, or I need a further discussion on this and we will decide at a later date. Just make it really clear what they're supposed to do. Overall, when you're looking at the flow, consider if the flow is logical. Will it make sense to those who are not familiar with the topic? At this point, you think about the agenda and the overview. And then also think about, lastly, the next steps. You must have some further action from your audience. You must. Even if just to go away and tell them to think about what you said. So essentially the structure of a good presentation is tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you told them. This all comes to life. And we'll do this right now with a short activity. Given what you see on the screen here, there's a lot of information. But what do you think the key message is? So you could put that into the chat, and we'll seeing a lot of great responses here in the chat. And it's really focusing in on that key message to ensure that we get a result. So as Michael says, sales will increase by 30%. That's pretty clear. That's pretty direct. I'm seeing this echoed across others. It's having that focus on the audience. Increase sales. By investing today, as Lisa says, will increase sales by 30%. Yeah, these are very clear ways to for Bob to keep in mind when he's delivering his presentation. Hey, what's actually do people need to know? So if we think about this, from a message standpoint, Bob wants management to use the capital budget for his equipment to this year. The business implication is that sales will increase by 30%. The data shows that when the equipment was built, there were material shortages, so the equipment's longevity is compromised. The rationale is that moving it forward 5 months will result in increased sales and increased production efficiency. So with that in mind, it's the idea, like you've said, is to move for the capital allotment this year and realize a 30% increase in sales. And you've all picked up on that key message. As we further building upon that key message, really think about these in the summary. It's the importance of focusing on your audience needs. That's been a consistent theme throughout. And with that in mind, having the appropriate level of information, compelling visual aids, and a logical flow and checklist. So with that, we have the basics for which to be able to have information that is effective. Now we turn to the second part of appearing confident. And all these next three components are all in the delivery of the message. And this is surprisingly, but very true, equally as important as the message that we're saying. So how you're delivering it is incredibly important to increase your corporate regard. The key way of doing this is to exude that confidence. You've shared with me in the chat that many of you practice, which is critical. So this enables you to appear capable and in control of the type of person that gets promoted. This practicing allows you to relax and appear confident. We don't like to do it. I know I'm looking at you right now. I know you don't want to practice. I know you think. I'm seeing someone else now. I know you think you can just wing it. We all do. But the importance of practice truly makes for smooth delivery. It's a secret that everybody knows about, but nobody does. I suggest you try it. Another simple trick that you can do regardless is smiling. It really helps. Sort of taking a few deep breaths, low down from the pit of your stomach, just before you take the stage. And don't start with a joke unless you are supremely confident. Jokes are high-risk things at the best of times, let alone at the start of a presentation. really my encouragement to you, be focused on these basic fundamentals with a focus on practice. You'll see now the difference that this relaxing, the smiling, these deep breaths, and a lack of jokes comes into play. What I'll be doing right now is reading a script twice with clenched fists, a frown, a slouch, and then I'll read it again while standing. This can allow you to really get a sense for a difference in opinion. So now you can hopefully hear me. I'm like hunkered down, I'm slouching, I'm not particularly going to close up my body, which you can't see, but you should be able to hopefully hear this. So set your reputation as confident and smart. Introduce yourself, tell them what you're going to tell them, why you're telling them it, why it's important, tell them how long you're going to take, tell them if they can ask questions. Now I'm going to try that same thing. I'm now standing up. Hopefully you can hear me. And a big smile on my face. Set your reputation as confident and smart. Introduce yourself. Tell them what you're going to tell them, why you're telling them it, why it's important. I'd like to hear from the chat what you've noticed in the differences with those two deliveries. Same content, different deliveries. I'm seeing confidence come through, interest come through, more confident. Change in tones is Rudy. The first one's not engaged. The second one's, as said, was smiling. Enthusiasm, as Eric says. It's crazy how much difference enthusiasm actually has as persuasion. Barry says it's captivating, the second version. Kendra says it's louder, more in control. Aaron says it's more interested. Presenter's more open in the second one, says David. Easier to understand too, more engaging, says Jillian. Definitely there's this ability to persuade people simply by how it's delivered. And when I sit down versus standing up with a deep breath and smiling, it naturally makes a big difference. So I'd like to know what you do to feel strong when you're delivering your presentations. What are some other tips and tricks that you do? I'm seeing practicing in front of the mirror. Eye contact, says Paul. Know my materials, says Leon. That's really critical. Practicing aloud, Danielle says. Practice, 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 as Trina says. Focus on keywords, as Thomas says. That's a good one. Very consistent themes from Tyler, Seth, and others, Aaron, about Ryan, about practicing information. It really helps with the confidence. Even knowing what lines or questions you may have. Walking around the room if you're on site, this is Paul, instead of just standing there. That can be effective. Casual banter when people are right. They said, oh, that's great. It truly helps break the ice. I was delivering a big presentation at a conference this week, and I made a point of talking to people and shaking their hands as they came in. Part of it was to make them at ease, but a lot of it was just so I would be at ease. These are great. You got great responses here to help take your presentations to the next level. So with that, really think about having that strong delivery. So and make sure you introduce yourself, tell them what you're going to tell them, why you're telling them it, tell them how long you're going to take, and then if they can ask questions. If you're nervous about being thrown off track, then it is okay to ask them to save their questions at the end. Again, knowing your audience, I'd be particular about that because someone will just ask the questions anyhow. But if you are nervous, it can be a great way to help you feel more control. And by the time you've done this introduction, you've established your authority, you've created your respect and credibility, you've overcome the worst of your nerves. And you know, you might even be enjoying it. Hey, it does happen. And if you're just giving a short presentation, by the time you're done what's listed here, you've actually completed a quarter of your presentation. So this opening is so critical to ensuring that you are set up well for success and that you feel good when you're delivering it. And building upon the great things that you are sharing in the chat, I think you'll enjoy putting these into practice. So with that, really remember that the solid opening really sets yourself up for success. So please continue to practice, or practice if you're not yet doing so yet. It builds confidence. Take those deep breaths and smile. Little things. Have that solid opening with a clear agenda. So now that we've opened for a great session using all the planning and compelling content from the first part, we now need some ways to command respect and really hold that audience's attention. So what do you think are some things you can do near the beginning of a presentation to capture the audience's attention? You could complete the chat. Do you think it is to say a joke, to quantify money or time savings, to move around, or to talk loud? Write down what you think is what you personally would do, and we'll see how everybody compares with that. It's some great responses coming through here, but a lot of variation as well. So I'll be curious to see where things land on this. Fantastic participation, and I'm also seeing movement in all 4 options here, which is great. I'm going to let you know what we're seeing. We're seeing most people are actually, they personally would move around, followed by quantifying the time or money savings. Some might talk loud, and a few would say a joke. So on that, this definitely comes down to your own personal preference and style. I would say for moving around, awesome. However, be careful. This doesn't come across as pacing. I don't typically see presenters, unless they have a lot of practice, use moving around very effectively. What they think is good use of space actually just comes across as like pacing, which makes the audience feel worried. Or what comes across is like shifting weight from one side to another, or like shifting left or right, which makes the audience feel like you are unsure of yourself. As for talking loud, great if you can do it. However, some people just don't have a loud voice, so it's not even an option. Saying a joke, again, can be risky at the best of times unless you're supremely funny. So use it if you're extremely confident and you know your audience. What I would say is, I'm going to click on this box here, is to really think about what those money savings are and what the time savings are. Generally, when you're making your business presentations, people want you to quantify this money and time saving near the beginning of your presentation. This is what they actually care about. It's part of your message, and you can do this regardless of your delivery style. And we'll speak more about delivery style in the next few slides. So again, this time and money savings, like who doesn't want to save money and save time? And speaking of time, it's also important to ensure you are capturing your audience's attention. So specifically, you want to ensure that you have those 4 to 7 seconds in which to make a positive impact, and you don't want to lose those. So type in the chat how long you personally, like your own personal circumstances, you felt that you've had in your own organizations before you start to lose attention. So this is your own personal examples. And it often varies based on organization. 45 minutes, 10 minutes. Aaron and David are saying 10 minutes. Candace saying 3 minutes. So is a few people actually. Linda saying 5 minutes. 2 minutes is Ryan, as is David. John says about 15 minutes. Interesting, because these really do vary. 30 seconds, 5 minutes. I'm seeing a lot of variation, but I'm seeing a lot of immediacy. These 90 minutes. Pearl saying the 5 minutes. Thank you. As Mark is also echoing that, was 2 to 3 minutes. you really need to capture attention up front. And the way you can do that is having that solid foundation, that practice. What we typically see, and I'm seeing echoing here in your responses, it's like after 10 minutes, they're often gone. Just because often your stakeholders themselves are so busy. So it's so critical, again, just reiterating, to make that positive impact, have that good opening impression. So make sure you have this good, solid introduction and rehearse it. Now, we're going to look at seeing as we see it's so important to maintain the audience attention. You may be wondering, okay, but Danielle, how can I do that? If I have this presentation, I need to keep them engaged not only in the beginning, but throughout. What can I do? So this is a picture of my desk right now. As you can, a bunch of things in front of me. And what are some ways that we can help gain that attention? We have spoken a bit, and I see through your chat responses, but having a variety of media and movement. So the movement that you mentioned earlier to capture attention can be useful to keep people engaged. It's also important, though, not to stay too long in the same subject and the same mode of delivery. So similar to the responses I'm seeing about how long it keeps people's attention, you don't want to stay too long on one subject. The average attention span is generally between 5 to 10 minutes for any single unbroken subject. So break it up and inject some diversion and variety, both in terms of the content as well as the media. So I'm going to, let's look here, this fascinating facts. Facts can be great. These are really useful to include, to generate interest, especially if they persuade your point. Again, depending on your audience, they can be good to help secure buy-in. So look next at these graphs. So the change in visual medium, graphs, can really allow people to use different parts of the brain to process information. So detailed graphs and information should be handed out, though, so people can absorb them better. So I'm sure many of us in our facets of our work have a lot of data to share, and graphs become a key means of that. As a simple tip, interject what you're showing. So instead of showing 20 graphs in a row, break it up with either key messages or having like arrows on, just simple arrows on screen, highlighting your messages, and maybe save some of these more detailed graphs as handouts, which takes me to my next point of this. I'm going to click here for the reference sheets. So if it's needed, reference sheets can be a great way to share some of those more detailed information. Plus, having a paper handout also maintains interest. They're really useful for the audience, and people like referring to them later. And you can use color paper so it's easier to find during your presentations, especially in our paperless world. I mean, obviously be choiceful, but I find it's a great way to re-engage the audience if needed, and it's on their topic, so it's completely relevant. I'm going to click here. So another key thing to do is to ask questions. So get people to raise their hands. It's a terrific way to generate interest and wake up the audience. Just simply getting people to raise their hands is an easy way of doing that. Click here. Another idea is to refer to current events. So use current events that are relevant to your topic so the audience can relate to it. And use different parts of the brain to process the information. Click here, flip chart. This is such an easy thing that is no longer used, which has all the more power to it and why it's so useful. Right on a flip chart or right on the board. And people are naturally gravitate to what you're writing. It's so simple. You can write anything from having a graph already in the chart, and you just loosely draw the sine curve or whatever you're trying to show, like something representative of your data, or you can even just write down a key word, or you can capture some people's responses and ideas. It is magical, especially because everybody is used to PowerPoint. And then lastly, another simple one, click here, is props. So if there's any way you can think of relevant props or samples to pass around, it'd be a great way to stimulate physical activity involvement. So some some are easier to implement than others, and all are crazy effective, so effective at engaging your audience during the presentation. So what are some ways that you use to capture attention of your audience while delivering your presentation? If you could write those in the questions. Paula is saying she uses 3-hole punch laminated cheat sheets, which is great as a handout. David and some others are saying they ask lots of questions to the audiences. Danielle is using the black screen. Yeah, you can do that on PowerPoint. It gets the focus back on you. Rudy asks questions. Steve uses props. Angela points to items in the PowerPoint. Isn't that so simple? And it works. You point, people look. Yet people don't do these tricks. I love it. Ellen hands out treats and asks questions. Trina uses analogies as well as asking questions to help people relate. This all comes down to helping understand your audience, making them feel included, as Barry's saying. And Steve's echoing that with using handouts that are useful and relevant. These are fantastic ideas. I encourage you to use what I've shared, what we're learning from each other, and try to implement at least 2 of these in your next program that you're delivering. And with that, another way that we can do this and maintain attention is with our voice tone. So I'm going to read a statement first in a fairly boring way, and then I'll read it again with more interest. And you tell me what you're seeing as a difference. And this is actually some of the real stuff. Every year, Children's Aid helps 800 foster children. Despite this, the success of these children is startling. Over half of these children will develop feelings of worthlessness, hopelessness, and depression. Many will end up homeless or losing their own children to the system. 1 in 3 will attempt suicide. So, love to hear if you can put in the chat, what do you feel as the audience listening to this? Tim saying disinterest with the topic. Sleepy, as Leanne says, lonely. Danielle says no urgency, disinterested, boring, says Ryan, Wesley, Alanette. Oh, and distracted. Alan Linder saying it seems like uninterested. And somebody mentioned, whose name I won't mention, sounds like a colleague. Oh, yeah, I've had many people I know who present with lack of energy, like what Mark is talking about here. So in contrast, same message. If I read this with more enthusiasm, same message, we'll get every year, Children's Aid helps 800 foster children. Despite this, the success of these children are startling. Over half of these children develop feelings of worthlessness, hopelessness, and depression. Many will end up homeless, or even losing their own children to the system. 1 in 3 will attempt suicide. So type in what you noticed. What did you notice with this delivery instead? Compassion, as Danielle says. More engaging, says Ryan and Tim. Alanette, Ryan, and Eleanor also talked about that the voice delivered the message. And Paul mentioned that it seems more personalized. Michael, Danielle, and Eric also had the themes of empathy in there. And I honestly couldn't help but feel empathy when I was delivering it, which I did by standing, of course, and having the right tone, and keeping my audience in mind, as we spoke about earlier. All simply done through voice. And this comes with practice. It's not to say that this cannot be a learned skill. Like, yeah, you can learn it. When you're practicing your delivery, this is a time to play with your vocal variety. And keep in mind, a good way of doing that to test yourself is to simply play it back. So record something, play it back. Again, it all comes down to the importance of practice. So to summarize this, some ways to capture and maintain attention, or really think about the what's in it for me for the audience. So quantify this time and money value. for them upfront. Use a variety of media and content to engage your audience. Use vocal variety to engage. Which takes us now to the last section. So we've got a great presentation strategy. We've planned. We know our audience. We developed the right content, not too much for them. We've got a strong delivery starting at the start and using techniques to capture attention throughout. One effective way that encompasses all of these delivery methods is effective body language. So in terms of body language, are there particular skills that you feel you are most aware of right now and actually naturally do already? I'd like to hear, have you type that into the chat. Eye contact, voice projection, key themes from Dave and Danielle. Stand tall, don't slouch is Leon. That's great. That's so good to do that naturally. That can be tricky, actually. For me, it's a tricky one. Ariel says to smile. As Tyler says, I talk with my hands, maybe too much. Tyler, it would be really telling for yourself if you can just play back. So get somebody's phone set up, play it, watch yourself, then you'll see for real. I'm seeing a lot of people naturally do eye contact, which is typical. Jillian also builds on this by opening your arms to the audience. These are all great ways to, great things that we should build upon because they are absolutely critical. So with that in mind, we're going to actually get into some of these. Let's think about which one we want to do first. Let's look at this one here. So really avoid crossing your arms. It goes without saying, many of us know this, yet we still tend to do this. So yes, do use your hands. So Tyler, your hand use is great. So do use your hands, but they don't belong on people's hips or in your pockets or folded across your chest or behind your back. There's an effective way to use them, which we'll get to next. It's the idea of using these big, deliberate gestures. So this helps the audience emphasize a point, to express emotion, and it really helps engage your audience. And, you know, anyone can think of a gesture that supports words such as short or tall, so use those. And keep in mind, the gestures of everyday conversation tend to be too small, so make your gestures big. And with that, have a solid stance. I mentioned at the beginning that sometimes people read you incorrectly and may read the messages of pacing or of going and back-to-back shifting weight. So my advice to be is your stance speaks. So have this balanced stance with your weight even, but slightly forward. And that tends to tell your audience that you're engaged with them. And as an easy first tip, I would say have just a solid stance. As you get more advanced, or if you can watch yourself on a recording, that's when you start to play with moving across the room. Smile, as we've mentioned, this comes into play, the facial expressions, movements of your eyes, mouth. These really build a connection with your audience. And unfortunately, under the pressures of delivery, sometimes we really forget this. Or we have this frozen, helpless smile on our face. So keeping in mind what you're talking about, and at the beginning of your presentation, have that deep breath and smile, and do have that smile throughout. So really, you know, being natural actually doesn't cut it. We need bigger, more expressive, and more powerful actions. It does take extra energy and effort, and it also takes skill and practice. But with so much depending on communication, and communication depending on body language, it's worth getting it right. So my challenge to you is work on your body language, your gestures, your stance, your facial expression to make the most of every presenting opportunity. And the best teacher you'll find in this is yourself. Get a recording, get somebody to record you while presenting, or do it yourself in your own home while you're practicing, and you'll be astonished to see your own plan of how you can improve. And it'll pay dividends in your corporate regard. Is there one body language tip you've been given that you either from what you've heard about already or you hear today that you will be employing going forward? I want to know one thing that you're going to implement. Saying smile in a clear, loud voice. Looking at the audience. No fidgeting. I'm seeing a lot of no fidgeting. Jeanette saying to smile. And don't cross your arms. Big, big, big gestures coming through. Ariel saying the open arms. Avoid turning your back to the audience. Yes. And easier said than done. When we have PowerPoint behind us, we tend to have our back to the audience, but please, please don't do that. And as Angela says, smile, big gestures. And John echoes that with gestures. Good. I hope to virtually feel your presence at these great big gestures you're doing, not fidgeting, having this welcoming, warm smile in your next presentation. So with that, really think about this. Really plan these deliberate large gestures. Think big. When I do motion for big, it's way above my hands. My hands are way outstretched above my head. And from an audience's standpoint, it looks good. And I've practiced enough so it feels natural while presenting. And avoid these crossed arms, as I've seen you say in your chat. Have the appropriate facial expression and a stable stance. And coupling on that, Patricia's saying is limit the unnecessary walking around. So in summary, we have covered a lot of awesome information, and your participation has really helped contribute to the knowledge of everybody. We've talked about the importance of anticipating the audience's needs, having a clear objective, and knowing the decision maker's needs. We've talked about the importance of planning your data. So having data at the appropriate level of detail, supporting that with compelling visual aids. And I have included a checklist in the handout so you can help you organize your flow. We've looked at the importance of your opening. This sets up your reputation and your corporate regard. So practice, deep breaths, have a solid opening and clear agenda. And continue that by capturing, maintaining your audience's attention by quantifying the time and money savings and using a variety of media and vocal variety to engage them. And then lastly, we talked about the importance of body language, deliberate gestures, no crossed arms, and having that stable stance. I'm going to close off today with the one thing, your one takeaway that you're going to implement next week based on what we've talked about today. I want to hear what you are doing, what you commit to. Practice, is Eleanor. That's a good one. Practice is Ryan as well. Smiling while presenting. Natural doesn't cut it. Focus on preparation. Lisa says she's going to understand her audience. Chris says she's going to have a variety of materials. Tyler is going to use boards. And I'm seeing a lot of similarities here in having clear content and practice, like Morella is saying. The clear body language, looking at myself, improving my body language through video, practicing, and really reiterating that natural doesn't cut it. What I'm seeing through these themes is the importance of practicing and preparation. These are what makes a good speaker, and anybody can achieve these. Thank you. Keep that information flowing. And I want to let you know there is handouts that have been emailed that can be resent, as mentioned, the 3 different handouts. And if you have further questions, feel free to email me. I also have various infographics on topics I'm happy to share as well, and you can find me on LinkedIn. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Olia.
Okay, thank you so much, Danielle. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I hope you enjoy the webinar. I'll be sending you a quick email with your certificates. You also have a very short evaluation there as well. If you can fill out the evaluation, we would appreciate it. We're very open for feedback as well. And otherwise, we're all done for today. And thank you for coming again. And Danielle, thank you for sharing your expertise. And have yourself a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'll put my info in the chat in case you have further questions. Feel free to email me. And best of luck on your next presentation. And I'm excited to see and hear about what you're implementing next week. Take care.